if we've got incursions by fixed-wing Russian aircraft, then there's absolutely no reason at all why NATO shouldn't scramble its own defensive aircraft and escort the Russian aircraft out of their airspace. If it's a question of drones, well, it depends what those drones, the purpose of those drones' mission is. I mean, if they are attack drones, then there is a good reason to shoot them down. But I think we have to be careful not to allow the rhetoric to turn into escalation, which itself becomes an increasing problem in its own right.
Is this the moment the war in Ukraine changes? In a post on Truth Social, President Trump said he now believes Ukraine can win all of its land back from Russia. His new tone towards the conflict came after meeting President Zelensky, and it wasn't a one-off. He repeated the thrust of it later on after meeting French President Emmanuel Macron.
It could be that Russia's a paper tiger. I don't know what they are, but 3.5 years of fighting and killing everybody, of killing 7,000 people a week. For nothing. So it's a very sad situation, but most of you have seen the recent statement I put out a little while ago. But I feel that way. I really do feel that way. Let them get their land back.
It is strikingly different from previous lines the president has taken. He suggested Ukraine should give up land for peace with Russia, and only last month he welcomed Russia's Vladimir Putin for that summit in Alaska. President Zelensky thought that Trump had the potential to alter the course of the war.
Trump is a game changer by himself if he will be sure in Ukraine, and I think that he is more close now to this situation.
That was President Zelensky. So is this a game-changing moment, and what does it mean in reality? Well, joining us now is Sir Richard Dannatt, the former head of the British Army. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
How seriously do you take the remarks from Donald Trump? Because on the face of them, they are incredibly significant. It's a complete change in direction. But how seriously are you taking them?
Well, I think you've almost answered the question by saying on the face of it. The trouble is, take the many utterances from Trump yesterday on a whole variety of subjects. It almost seemed that he was talking off the top of his head on a whole variety of topics. And it's very difficult to know what is to be taken seriously and what not. Yes, on the face of it, it's good to hear him talking tough in support of Zelensky. We didn't hear any great concrete proposals, but one has to assume that the United States is now more minded to provide weapons and ammunition and that kind of support that Ukraine desperately needs. But frankly, we need to see some substance behind the words, because the words from Trump, frankly, don't at this precise moment carry sufficient credibility.
And would it be possible in military terms to retake all of that land? I mean, that's something that not really even President Zelensky is talking about seriously at the moment.
Well, militarily, it's a very tall order. You've got a very large Russian army that is itself pretty well equipped, with a long front line. And I think in all reality, from a military practical point of view, pushing the Russians back all the way to the 1990 borders. And I think we have to assume that Trump was talking about Crimea as well. Militarily, that's a really tall order, verging on the impossible. I mean, I think more realistically is some form of ceasefire, giving up the idea that Trump has talked about of a land swap, of this war stopping on its existing front lines, and then a pause for thought at that point. I think a ceasefire on existing front lines has always been a possibility. Land swaps, most unattractive as far as Ukraine is concerned, and pushing the Russians out of Ukraine militarily, pretty much impossible.
Yeah, and that's the question, isn't it? I mean, all of this depends on Vladimir Putin's response to what Donald Trump has been saying. And it's clear that the relationship between the two men, if there ever really was one, is now broken down. How do you think Russia will interpret these remarks, especially in the context of them seeming to test EU nations with their incursions into airspace?
Well, you're absolutely right. Putin has been testing NATO's resolve, and I think NATO has responded well up to this point in various countries invoking Article 4, the right to consult with other allies. And I think that's an important thing to do. We have to remember that one of Putin's war aims has always been to break up the harmony of NATO, and I think he's singularly failing as far as that's concerned. But whether he takes Trump's words seriously, I don't know. I mean, I think Trump himself in recent times has talked about Putin tapping him along. And I think there is an element of almost both tapping each other along and not actually having any serious intention to negotiate. Given that Zelensky himself has said from some time that he's willing to negotiate, we're not hearing the same from Putin at all. And I don't think these words from Trump will change Putin's mind very much at all.
Do you think the EU nations need to get a bit tougher when it comes to dealing with some of these incursions by drones and other things? Because Donald Trump is saying very clearly overnight they should be shooting them down. EU nations and NATO allies should be shooting these things down.
Well, I think there are other measures short of shooting them down that should be followed first. I mean, if we've got incursions by fixed-wing Russian aircraft, then there's absolutely no reason at all why NATO shouldn't scramble its own defensive aircraft and escort the Russian aircraft out of their airspace. If it's a question of drones, well, it depends what those drones, the purpose of those drones' mission is. I mean, if they are attack drones, then there is a good reason to shoot them down. But I think we have to be careful not to allow the rhetoric to turn into escalation, which itself becomes an increasing problem in its own right.
Yeah.
So I think we need to be measured about how we respond to these incursions.
I want to ask you finally, Sir Richard, there is a story on the front page of the Telegraph newspaper today. It's about female soldiers who are, and I'm quoting here, locking themselves in their bedrooms at night to avoid potential sexual assault. They've got some really shocking details in this piece. One of the stories is about a woman who was subjected to a male soldier banging on her door for 2 hours, shouting, "I'm not going to hurt you." She filmed the incident, but didn't feel able to speak out about it because of her concerns about how it would be taken. Does this kind of report concern you? It was commissioned by army bosses and written by an independent academic, but it wasn't published. They were really concerned about publishing it. Does it worry you?
Well, I'm not conversant with the detail of that report, but any serial allegations like that have to be taken very seriously. We've said it so many times that there needs to be an inclusive culture in any organisation, and the Army is one such organisation, and that male and female soldiers ought to be able to work well together. And if that is not the case, then there's a serious issue that the chain of command has got to take itself very seriously, and if necessary, independent observers be brought in. I don't mean independent observers in units and whatever, but I think a report like this needs to be analysed very carefully, and if there are institutional changes that need to be made still, then they should be made.
Sir Richard Dannatt, the former head of the British Army, many thanks for joining us on the programme.
Thank you.
And we're going to carry on over the course of the programme trying to work out if Trump's volte-face on Ukraine is meaningful or not. As Richard Dannatt says there, it's very hard to work out precisely how much you can take him at face value or not.